You either have two options in life. You can go insane or go stoic. Choose wisely. So, welcome to the channel. I'm Dr. Stoic, and today we're going to give you a crash course through Stoicist philosophy. I am totally excited for this. Stoicism in 2020. Are you ready? I totally am. And I'm going to give you a rundown of basically what the Stoics are, what they stood for, and basically how they can help you live a better life. And I have a PowerPoint here, so be prepared. It's just basically going to be like a class lecture session on this stuff. But as for me, I've been engaging in Stoicism for about a month. I do have a personality that lends myself towards this philosophy. I find it to be a very good lens to navigate life through. Um, I realize that this isn't really for everybody. I mean, it does take a lot of work to basically achieve what the Stoics called eudaimonia, which I will get to in a minute. But these, even if you don't want to identify as a Stoic, I hope that you take some of the exercises I'm going to show you today, and I hope that you practice it, because I feel that doing these particular things can help you and your well-being. A lot of what Stoicism is just proto-psychology. So if you kind of look at it from that lens, it's actually not right. It's not like what the name implies. People, when they think of what a stoic individual is, they think of somebody who doesn't show their emotions, right? Like they're just so dead inside that they just do what needs to be done rather than feeling or living within their emotions, right? And that's totally not what Stoicism is at all. It's a totally different school of thinking and how to manage feelings, and I feel that a lot of people could benefit from this. So, Stoicism in 2020, let's go. So, the Stoics believe in the pursuit of four virtues, and upon pursuing these virtues, one could live in a state, or rather not a state, but a level of happiness called eudaimonia, which has nothing to do with ammonia that you can buy at the store. Uh, so that's basically not what that is. Eudaimonia is an objective happiness. So instead of feeling good from pursuing in a short term type of pleasure, eudaimonia in general is an objective happiness that can serve as a standard for other people to aspire to. What makes up that level of happiness? Well, according to the Stoics, it was the pursuit of wisdom, temperance, courage, and justice, which, it sounds pretty obvious at first glance, right? Like, but how many of you guys actually practice this in your daily living, right? It's really hard to, because currently no other philosophy, and I've dug into quite a bit, honestly. I mean, no other way of living, maybe religion is the closest thing, but there's really no tool set or anything that enables you to or encourages you to engage in these things. And as a result, I feel that a lot of what's going on today, a lot of the bad things that are occurring come from the fact that none of us value these things in reality. Um, we are very hyper focused on the system, and I'll get to that in a later slide, rather than our own individual level of happiness and satisfaction. So, next slide. What's wrong with society today? And I feel that this is a mindset of living versus surviving. So, what is living and surviving? Well, living, according to the Stoics, is flourishing, right? You're living life, you're enjoying life, you have complete control over your brain and your body, right? And you establish a peace which comes as a result of eudaimonia, which is similar to the concept of nirvana in Buddhism, except not so much of a spiritual enlightenment, but you've just achieved that next level of living, right? You're living virtuously. And living virtuously means that you're flourishing. So the lack of that is the survival mindset, where you're actually perishing. And living in a survivalist mindset is actually what 90% of people are doing right now. They are living day to day at the whims of their emotions. They have no idea how to control them. They're anxious, they're depressed, they're way too caring in what other people think about them, and they care too much about making other people happy, even to the detriment of their own well-being. Like, what about you, right? It's basically one of those things where it's obvious, but I feel like if laid in this format, it actually becomes apparent of how much we lack as a society when it comes to this sort of thing. And a lot of us just have the survivalist mindset. We work jobs we hate. We, just want to get through the day, right? And it's just, life is just this void that's incredibly difficult to navigate, especially without any type of system that's there. And getting into more of these, I'm going to try my best not to read off the slides, but basically the gist of what I'm trying to say is you have to control your mental states and your emotional states. And this can be done through the exercises. So short-term passions, excessivity, and a lack of control will lead to a miserable life. And this is basically how I lived, how I'm sure many of you have lived for a long time. It's just one of those things where if you don't take care of yourself, and if you just use short-term passions as just these short getaways to constantly avoid stuff that needs to be worked on in your life, then these things are just going to spiral out of control and get worse and worse. So, another misnomer. First, we had to establish what being a Stoic is. Second, we have to establish what being indifferent is. And indifferent has a very negative connotation in the modern era. Being indifferent in the realm of Stoicism is actually a healthy detachment from reality. You are not letting the negative affect you, not as much anyway. This is very difficult to do, but when you engage in these things every single day, you will notice a difference. You will notice a decrease in anxiety, a decrease in depression, a decrease in fear about things that are beyond your control. And really, the Stoic plight here is maintaining the eudaimonia. How do we uphold the system of living virtuously in order to maintain this state of peace where nothing can really affect you? And ultimately, I feel that what I've observed, at least from the Stoicist mindset, and I'm just a beginner at this thing, is rather the internal orientation versus external orientation of life. For those of you who've taken Psych 101, this is very similar to locus of control. So there's internal locus of control and external locus. And basically the conclusion from that dichotomy is you want an internal locus of control because that gives you real empowerment, right? This is a philosophy that gives you true empowerment, and it gives you a tool set to engage with. So internal orientations are only caring about things that you can control, right? I mean, this is an obvious thing. If you have less to worry about, you're going to be less anxious and you're going to leave room for more happiness in your life. So if you only care about the things that you can control, you're going to actually be in control of things. I mean, if you turn on the TV and watch the news and watch all of these horrible things, and really it's just the news in general in the year 2020 has just become a constant negative stream. It's gotten to the point where I've basically had to distance myself from a lot of these stories. Donald Trump's Twitter account, all this stuff. Um, it's just constant propagation of fear and anxiety. And you have the power to take a part in that or not, right? Like society, just because society is pushing something doesn't mean that you have to partake in it. And I feel that this is a very powerful realization, that you and only you have the ability to control how you react to external events happening. And once you find that out, well, that gives you the power to filter out anything anxiety provoking or anything that would trigger depression. You're going to get rid of that. Um, and this is going to be later expressed as an exercise here. But ultimately, the goal for you is to become bulletproof to any type of negativity. Um, you're not going to compare yourself to other people too, right? And that's one of the big things about social media. It's a highlight reel for everybody else that you're connected with in life. And it's simply not real. It's not even a realistic thing, right? Like these people could be lying to you about all the good things in their life. And really, they could actually be more miserable than you, but they have you in a miserable state because they are portraying a false image where they're living the life and you're not. So, again, Stoics do not compare their self progress to other people because it's just a one way trip to depression. We control excessive passions in order to experience joy. And it's kind of like that discipline, right? Like you see that pastry and you want that pastry, and it's like, you know, I really, really want to eat that. But when you don't, because you might be on some type of dietary plan or whatever, or you have weight loss goals or whatever, when you don't do it, you experience that type of joy, which is different from the joy of eating the pastry. So you're just taking the levels of joy and you're just choosing one level of joy over the other because the joy of not eating that pastry will lead to the benefit of you getting to your target weight loss goal, right? Goal keeping is a cornerstone of Stoicist thought and philosophy because it is really the only thing that we have control over. But we do not have control of the outcomes, which will later be expressed. And ultimately, one characteristic or stereotype of what a Stoic is a person who can basically just not care. And that's not care in an uncaring. It's not necessarily not caring in an uncaring way, if that makes sense. It's just that when the negative um, events come into your life, you're just letting them roll off you like rain, right? You're not letting them affect you because you have the ability basically to segregate things that you can control and things that you cannot control. And basically, here's one thing that I really want to stress here is in order for society to get better, a Stoic would focus on changing himself or herself first before he tries to go out or she goes out and attempts to solve the larger problems that society has. I'm not trying to get political again, but I feel that what a lot of other philosophies try to do, mainly Marxist philosophies, is they try to hyper focus on the problems that society gives us. And if we focus way too much on what society, what's going on and how can we fix this and that without even really focusing on the stuff that we should be working on in our own personal lives, this will also lead to ruining the eudaimonia, right, that we're trying to fight to maintain. So changing society first, erroneously leading to a better life, is actually not true, right? Like, because we have no control over society. We have no control over, really, over how things are run in our government or our schools or anything like that. We can only be forced to participate within these environments. And the only way, really, to change the environment is to first change your perspective of it. And once you realize that you have that control, then you can actually start affecting positive change within the society, if that makes sense at all. So, We're going to go through 5 Stoic exercises, and I'm going to go as quick as I possibly can. I want this video to be short so it can be watchable. I tried recording this before, but it ended up being 45 minutes long, and I don't think anybody's going to have time for that. So, first, we're going to talk about cognitive distancing. And this is going to be a little bit weird, especially for the first time for you guys delving into this. Like, what's being a Stoic like, and how do Stoics practice control over their emotions and stuff like that? And the trichotomy of control, all that it is the stuff that I said before. You have things you have control over, things you don't have control over, and things you may or may not have control over. So what I'm going to talk about are things that I have control over and things that I may or may not have control over. Now, mainly, what do we have control over in our lives? Well, I would say that the goals that we create for ourselves, as long as they're realistic, are things that we do have control over, right? We have to navigate through life somehow, and we do that with goal keeping. So the goals that we choose for ourselves are ultimately items that we can manipulate and adjust as we go along pursuing them. As an example, things that you may or may not have control over is like an exam performance or a sporting event, right? And how a Stoic approaches this is do your due diligence and whatever you can to affect the most positive outcome for the event, right? So if you have an exam, you're going to study your butt off for it. But who the heck knows what's going to happen on exam day, right? You could try to go there and be a little bit late because of a traffic jam. There could be a fire drill that occurs during the exam. There could be all these little different things that could get in the way of your performance and thus render a grade that's not as desirable. So basically, the fates, which I'll get into later, may not have a good outcome for us. And what you have to do is you have to anticipate all outcomes, prepare for all outcomes, and use a couple other exercises I'm going to get into right after this to basically steel yourself against the bad happening if it does happen. So, without further ado, cognitive distancing, the trademark of Stoicism, really is how at least an amateur Stoic will operate. Another thing that we can do is negative visualization, and this ties in very well to the cognitive distancing. So what is negative visualization? Well, it's basically playing a Jedi mind trick on yourself. So first we have the act of negative visualization, which is basically just a short ponderance, maybe like a minute out of your day on a daily basis, to reflect on a hypothetical bad event that could possibly occur. So if I'm going to take an exam, about a week before, I'm going to engage in negative visualization technique. So not only am I going to anticipate failing to put me in the right mental space to prepare for it, but I'm going to live as if I had already failed the exam. So again, this is going to be very weird. It's just like, well, that's a really interesting way of tackling that. Like, especially if you suffer from performance anxiety, like a job interview or asking somebody you like out or anything like that. You should pretend that not only the bad thing will occur, or rather the bad outcome will occur, but that it already happened. And what this does is that it tremendously reduces your anxiety and gets rid of any type of depression before the event occurs. Because chances are, as long as you prepare, things are generally going to tend to be favorable. Things will generally go within the intended outcome. If the bad thing does occur, at least you've prepared for it, and chances are things won't be nearly as bad as how they occurred within your negative visualization session. So what is this basically meaning here? What's the meaning of this? Is basically it's a mental boot camp, right? We have to train soldiers and Marines through a pretend boot camp in order to steel their minds for the actual battle, right? And every day is a battle in life. And the Stoics really believe that you don't know what each day will bring. There could be catastrophes waiting to happen at any time. So basically, you're tricking your brain into the correct mental space by already convincing yourself in an odd sort of way that the bad event already happened. It's kind of like you not participating in this exercise, taking the exam, subsequently failing it, and then, okay, I really have to gear myself up for exam number 2. I really have to do better. But the reality is that you're in that mental space before you even take the first exam, if that makes any sense at all. So now you're using an emotional tactical trick to reduce, or rather mitigate, anxiety, any type of negative emotions going into that initial activity. So the important takeaway from here is to contemplate, not obsess over this. So you're sitting down and you're just entertaining this thought. And if you can entertain that thought and be disciplined in not letting it overwhelm you, but simply just preparing, anticipating for it, then that gives you the power. It actually gives you much better performance in future events that will occur. And ultimately, we're fighting to maintain eudaimonia, right? This is one of the many outcomes that this, or many exercises that the Stoics have that will hopefully reduce your anxiety and put you in an anxiety-free mental state. So, the Stoics believed in fate. More namely, they believed in causal determinism. So what is that? Causal determinism is fate's existing, but you have the ability to change your fate. All right. There are multiple fates for everybody. And ultimately, you want to use goal keeping to get you to the best possible fate. Right. Because ultimately, all of our fates is that we're all eventually going to die at some point. Right. So what the Stoics believe is that since we have this reality of this definite fate of death, that we should be dedicated to living virtuously, meaning living the best life possible. And in order to do that, you kind of have to adopt this fatalist mindset to basically make you reanalyze life from the top down and realize what's truly important, which I will get to in just a second. So fatalism, as the Stoics believed, really are best applied when you're looking in retrospect, right? So you have the past and the present, and we should have a fatalist mindset towards the past and present only. It's the exact opposite of what most people think about fates, right? Like if you believe in a fate, well, that means that you believe in a certain outcome in the future. But since the Stoics did not believe in definite outcomes within the future other than the obviousness of death, they say we can really only be fatalist towards the past and the present moment. And what this does is a number of things. One is we just learn how to accept our lives, right? The truth is that if you think you're miserable now about what's going on in your life, you might have a much better life than a whole community of other people in the world or even in the nation you're living at. Life is irrational and just might not grant us the fortune we desire. In other words, the world owes you nothing. And Stoicism gives you the power to just kind of trudge on through that, right? Like it gives you foresight into what can and maybe stuff that you couldn't even fathom occurring. And it gives you the ability to be strong and to empower you. You have to live as though everything that you're given in life, from your body, your mind, your consciousness, everything that you own, that basically everything is on loan from the universe itself. There is nothing you have that the universe hasn't given to you. And at any moment, the universe can take away from you. So I feel that looking in retrospect with that mindset, with a fatalist mindset, enables you to be incredibly thankful for living the life you've lived, engaging in the decisions you've lived to get up to the point where you are currently at. And I'm sure you've heard a quote, you guys may have heard a quote of being like water. The Stoics were all about adaptability. And I believe that adaptability empowers the individual, and that fighting unfavorable outcomes when they happen inevitably leads to misery or losing eudaimonia. So what that is if you don't have the ability to roll with the punches of life, I mean, you're just going to be overrun constantly on a daily basis. And I feel that, with these tools, with these mindsets, now we can finally, be adaptable. We can be fluid like water, right? Like we know that we have to be doing these things, but engaging in these types of mindsets and mental exercises will better enable us to help maintain our eudaimonia, respectively. And there's a difference between hoping versus expecting. So there's the attitude of God willing or fate permitting, all right? So we can only hope for the best things to occur to us and to other people, but we're mature enough to realize that we cannot expect these things to occur. And ultimately, just be the change you want to see, right? If you're waiting for a change to occur to you, well, you're going to be waiting a very long time. And I feel that a lot of Americans in particular, we've kind of been sold on a promise for change. And yet here we are when things are actually changing for the worst, when really we had the power all along to cause positive change. This exercise is meditation, but not in the meditative idea that you're thinking, right? So the Buddhists, or basically any other type of culture, will have different forms of meditation. The Stoic meditation that I'm recommending is kind of akin to journaling or diary keeping. Basically what this is an exercise in self-accountability. So if you sit down with yourself every morning or every evening or both, and you have the ability to ponder upon what happened or what will happen, you can keep a tally of everything that you've done every single day and ask yourself a series of questions. Could I have done this particular event better? Should I have reacted in this certain way to a certain individual? What could I do better? Have I done at least one good deed during the day? I feel that this is an incredibly powerful technique because it makes you look back throughout your day in retrospect to see if you are actually doing the practices, but also holding yourself accountable, being that positive change that you want to see in other people. Ultimately, what you are doing, or one of the consequences of doing this exercise, is you're basically training your brain to be more empathetic, right? Let's just say that somebody comes along and says like a sly or snide remark to you, and it made you upset, right? Well, at the end of your day, when you sit down and you contemplate to yourself on whether or not you should have been upset from that individual, you have to keep in mind that that individual, you don't know what they're going through in their life. You don't know what made them say that. You don't have any type of control over what this individual does or feels. So don't let that take away from your joy, right? Don't let that degrade your eudaimonia. Instead, realize that there's some other thing that's going on in this individual's life that made them say that to you. And that A, you should not be as upset, and B, you should be very careful in how you respond to them. And I feel like by looking at things in this perspective, you're actually becoming far more empathetic towards people in general, because you are slowly gaining an understanding of how people work in general, right? Where they're coming from. You have a grander perspective of society at large. And ultimately, this allows you to strategize for tomorrow, right? How can I do things better in the following days? Again, very powerful stuff. A lot of people engage in journaling as it is. All I'm asking here is just to ponder once or twice a day. Is something that I do. And basically, if you live life like this, you will not engage in behaviors that you will later come to regret. And I feel that this is a major problem in a lot of online communities, namely the Super Smash Brothers community, just a lot of different types of occurrences. I won't be specific as to which, that, you have to be careful about what you do. And a Stoic will be hyper vigilant of everything, of every action that they do when they're in public or even in private. So self accountability is definitely something that needs to be practiced by everyone. And last but not least, embracing discomfort. This is probably going to be the hardest exercise to do. But once you habitually get used to it, it doesn't become as bad. It's more like being used to nice things, right? You can be used to a nice thing, like a nice cell phone. But after a while of using it, you get used to it and it loses its glamour, it loses its glitter, and you become bored and you want more. You want the newer cell phone eventually. Well, basically, this is the undoing of that. So instead of habitual hedonism, which is engaging in pleasure activities, getting used to them, and then craving more, which is a cyclical system of misery, ironically. Going without things for a temporary period of time can actually reduce, it'll help reduce that cycle. So, if we reflect on how we take everything for granted just by going without it for a day, that is a very powerful life-altering perspective. So an example would be going to the store without your car one day, going without your cell phone for a day, taking a cold shower instead of a hot shower, maybe underdressing when it gets cold, or uh, going without food for a day. What I do typically once a week is I just fast for an entire day. And what that allows me to do is allows me to reflect on how much I take the availability of food for granted. Uh, so you can do these things, and there's a tremendous physiological and mental benefit for doing this. And in a later video, I will talk about dopamine and dopamine sensitivity. The Stoics were hitting on something that they obviously had no idea about because physiology was just not as advanced as it is today. But by going without something, you actually enjoy life a lot more, right? You're more sensitive to the good things that happen to you. And mindfulness and a lot of other different things can tap into this technique, really. But dopamine sensitivity is what restores the quality in your life, rather than engaging in more and more short-term pleasures that make you feel good temporarily. That will just make you end up chasing them all the more. Whereas if you learn to go out with something you take for granted, right, it's just like having electricity and then a storm knocks the electricity out. You'll become a lot more thankful when you go without that period, without internet, without phone, uh, without your fridge running. I mean, you need electricity for everything, right? Air conditioning when it's hot. So going without for a little period of time ultimately makes you a lot more thankful once you get it back. But there are a lot of instances in life where you don't get things back, right? This is kind of like the death of a loved one, or something far more traumatic. And I feel like by embracing discomfort, by anticipating it, you have the ability to greater appreciate things, people in your life, uh, than you were to previously your life before Stoicism. So ultimately, this maintains a mindset of humility uh, and counting your blessings, right? So by going without something that you largely depend upon, you just get this deeper sense of thankfulness, I guess, that you have for the things you already have. And what you're doing is you're retraining, you're reorienting your brain into a healthier mindset. Instead of thirsting after things that other people have or that other people may have, you're actually thirsting for the things you already have. So it is a very interesting mental trick that you can use on yourself. Stoicism, Jedi mind tricks for yourself. So with that, those are 5 Stoic exercises that you can just enjoy yourself with. And there's going to be a lot more content coming your way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a Twitter account perhaps, and you guys can submit inquiries in your life that I can use as anonymous case studies to analyze with a Stoic lens and give Stoic advice. So that being said, I shall put up a link soon, and I will be giving more content as to the history of Stoicism, people who have indulged in Stoicism. As a matter of fact, I have a video coming up about Nelson Mandela. I know that was the first thing I was going to try to do, but I feel that just introducing Stoicism first before we dive into the characters of people who have engaged with Stoicism would be a better way to talk about this. So in the meantime, this has been Dr. Stoic, and I will see you guys on the flip side.